Thank you all for joining us. I'm Lori Dempscher with DYOPATH, and we are here today to set the stage. This is a session about cybersecurity awareness training. So hopefully that's what you're here for. If it's not, please stick around because it's going to be time well spent. I am here today with my friend Eric Anderson from Symbol Security. I reached out to Eric and asked him to do this session with me because I read something online a couple of months ago that it's some absurd number of cyber breaches are caused by human error. When I read it, I mean, it was like well over 80%, well over 90% maybe even. And when I read that, I knew we had to do something for all of you. So I asked Eric to join me, and that's what we are here to do today.
Hey, thanks, Laurie.
Sure. Okay, so this is just super quick, a brief overview of what we are going to cover. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but the world of cybersecurity, I have seen it go from if it's going to happen to when it's going to happen. We unfortunately are in the world of when it's going to happen today. And the truth of the matter is security is everybody's job. And frankly, every organization, your people are your weakest link. So that's what we wanted to do today is give you some tools and ideas you can walk away with to implement immediately, and you'll start seeing that impact. All right. Now, just a quick high-level overview about who we are as DYOPATH. DYOPATH on paper, we're an MSP, we're an MSSP, but we do so much stuff in the world of IT. I prefer to think of us as an IT services organization. And you can see all of the things that we focus on in this slide. For me, I feel like what we focus on is helping all of our clients use technology the best they can to do and be their best every single day. So with that, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce Symbol.
Hey, Laurie, and we just want to make sure for everyone, the slides aren't forwarded, so we just want to make sure we check on that. So we're still actually on the homepage slide.
Oh, they aren't? Oh dear.
All right, so we'll skip forward a few, and we'll be in good shape.
Okay, let me see what happened here. Let's see. Nope, that's going the wrong way.
There we go.
So you can see that?
Yeah, we sure can. We're in good shape now.
Perfect.
So thanks for thanks for the introduction, Laurie, and you're excited to be working with the team at DYOPATH and having you as a partner of Symbol. And we're going to talk a lot about today around really what the challenges are. Certainly not a product push by any means. You're welcome to to explore Symbol, but there's really a lot of things we'll talk about that you could do internally. And if you want to simplify life and make things a little bit easier, certainly you could consider Symbol, but that's really not the the goal of the webinar. It's really to drive education around some of the steps, some of the things you look at, and frankly, some of the steps you can take internally or on your own as a DIY and reduce some of that risk. So at a quick high level, Symbol is a security awareness and phishing simulation training platform that really helps take employees, drive education around potential phishing risk, make employees more vigilant to the organization, identifying some of this risk to really reduce anything anything to the organization that could put that organization, that individual in a bad position via breach, right? Scams, things of that nature. So certainly looking forward to talking about some of this. Again, tell you a little bit more about what we do, but even some of the things you can do yourself is super critical to the to the organization.
Perfect. Well, moving on from that, Let's talk about, I know, Eric, this is what you guys do at Symbol. You educate people on how to educate their people on cybersecurity. So let's talk about, like, you can't read the news or open a paper, I'm dating myself, or turn on the radio or anything these days without hearing about some sort of cyber breach. So what's going on these days that it's everywhere now?
It's amazing. In going back to, when you opened up the conversation in the webinar, Laura, you talked about the statistic around, breaches and where they come
Mm-hmm.
from. It's north of 90% right now. So when you think about that, 9 out of, 10 breaches start with human error.
Yep.
People, as they say, are the weakest link, and
Yep.
educating them and making them more vigilant is the goal to start to help de-risk the organization.
Sure.
This has grown into a business, right? It's the business of cyber breaches and extorting organizations, which we'll get to, has,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the next slide is going to be eye-opening with one of the statistics out there.
Yep.
But, these are real businesses now.
Yep.
They're, what we see is some of these organizations, they're not, one or two people that are just targeting organizations. Some of these are real businesses with real financial backers, that are building a business on just extorting organizations,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the money that they can seize from some of these
Sure.
companies.
Sure.
And it grows on basically a weekly, monthly, and annualized basis. If you look at the statistics over
Yep.
time, it's unbelievable.
Yep. And I think, Eric, this one of the things that hit me, I recorded a webinar, or excuse me, a video for LinkedIn the other day about an organization that's a home healthcare organization. They're huge. They have 26,000 employees. Out of those 26,000 employees, two of them fell prey to a phishing scam. Two of them out of 26,000. Because of that, the private information of 100,000 elderly patients was released to the world. And now those people's families, those people are not only worried about their health, they're worried about their personal information, about their identities. So just that, I mean, it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are. This is something that is happening everywhere.
Yeah, it certainly is. And to take that one example, unfortunately, I think we see all the time that, people, tend to, victimize or,
Mm-hmm.
go after the elderly. And, sometimes it's believable, it's, sometimes, that generation is just not, cyber savvy or,
Right.
really understand the risk. And, when you have that type of information, those are some of the folks that, that really get extorted. We
Absolutely.
hear it all the time, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about this. These are big numbers. This is big,
Yes.
scary stuff, Eric. So talk to us about this.
It's the one, again, out of the 4 bullets here, the one that really, you know, hit home for me was really that second bullet, talking about cybercrime is larger than the entire global illicit drug trade. So think about that.
Mm-hmm.
We know what a problem is, the drug trade is. We know how profitable it is for a lot of these criminals. You look at the cartels, you think about, the money that flows through with that illicit drug trade, globally, and cybercrime is on top of that. It's almost unimaginable, right? When
Right.
you think about, those type of numbers and the type of, dollars that are, that are being extorted. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, and then when you take that even a step back and you think about, like, over 90% of that is happening because of human error,
Sure.
that's very manageable. Like, you could remediate that easily just through
Sure.
doing the kinds of things we're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah, and what we'll find is that, I think one of the statistics out there is, organizations that employ security awareness training
Mm-hmm.
program reduces the risk by like 75% of the organization.
Awesome.
Real numbers, right? When
Right.
you think about, employees becoming the tip of the spear, becoming more vigilant, really being able to identify risk before, it targets the organization,
Yep.
right? And if they get through, and there's a lot of things that could happen, sometimes organizations do all the right things, right, and they still get breached.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't do the right things at all, and it falls into the category of gross negligence.
Right.
And lots of fines.
Sure.
Follow that, right? You talk about the last bullet point. North of 5.5 billion in compliance fines, right? Those are real numbers, right? And you think of, sometimes some of the large organizations, if you're a Target or a Walmart or any of these big multi-billion-dollar companies, it's going to hurt, but they can absorb that. But think about the small to mid-sized business. You're a small business, right? Maybe 50 employees, 100 employees, whatever that number is. And you get breached, and you did do the right things. And one is the compliance fines that are associated with that. But more importantly, that breach, how does that affect your business?
Right.
You see all the time, a lot of these small businesses go out of business because they just can't recover, unfortunately, from some of these cyber events.
I actually I found a statistic yesterday after we talked, Eric, and I was kind of doing some background research on this. 60% of organizations that experience a cyber breach go out of business within 6 months. So those aren't the Targets. Those aren't the Colonial Pipelines. Those are, your 50 users, your 50 people, whatever it is. So that's a great point.
Crazy.
Okay, so this is a look at, as I mentioned when I was talking to everyone about who DYOPATH is, we basically do all things IT. But this is kind of a high-level view of our security practice. And as you can see by the title of the slide, the way we view this is security is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a one thing you do. It's not a one box you click. It's everybody's job. Security is not just IT's job. Security is not just your security team's job. Security is everybody's job. So, and that's one of the reasons, like I said, we do all of these things. One of the things we don't do is cyber awareness training for end users. And one of the things I love most about DYOPATH is when we don't do something, we bring in the very best so our clients have the best resources to get done what they need to get done. And that's why Eric's here today. So let's talk about this then. Why does this happen?
Laurie, it's crazy to think, right? When you think about the level of, users or employees that aren't educated on, some of the risk out there, right? Sometimes it's a very simple fix, right? And again, we'll go through the things that you can do internally. Again, certainly not, a product push. If you want to use Symbol, great. But we're going to talk about things that you could do just internally themselves as a DIY that, might start to, reduce some of that risk, right? So, first bullet, around employees are not properly educated on cyber criminal tactics, right? These, you see it, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the days, even with some of the, the phishing campaigns, the days of fuzzy graphics and poor English are over. These are attacks that are visually perfect. Graphics are visually perfect, right? You don't even actually know it's not coming from not the real organization. There's sometimes I live this thing every single day, right? There's sometimes I get things in my mailbox and it takes me a minute, right? Like they're pretty legitimate. I'm like, I start to figure out, I was like, okay, I still really start to dig deep. And then, there it is, right? It's they're getting very, very good, right? So, as these attacks and, cyber criminal tactics evolve, again, the education around that needs to evolve too.
Well, right? And I feel too, Eric, and I have heard this from clients, a lot of people who are employing a lot of young people, a lot of quote unquote digitally native people, they just assume they know this stuff. Right. Because they're like, they grew up with technology. They weren't alive when the internet was invented or whatever. It's not true. Just because someone knows technology and has never lived without technology, it doesn't mean that they understand how to recognize this stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'll give you an example. We were working with a company before they actually became a customer, and it was not a big company. It was about 77 employees. It was actually in the media space, and we were talking to them, and the CEO made that statement. My employees know exactly what to look for. On this side, we kind of chuckled about it, right? Because I don't care, small organization, big
Right.
organization, doesn't really matter. Everyone's a target, right? So one of the things that we did was called the baseline fish, which we no one in the organization knew, just the IT folks and the president of the company, and said, hey, let's test these employees to see where you're at, and if you're accurate, or if you could benefit from really educating some of the employees. We actually did a baseline fish to 77 employees. Out of the 77 employees, 26 of them clicked through the actionable links, the phishing links,
Yeah.
and out of that, 24 attempted to put in credential information.
Wow.
We try to harvest. So you think about that. One attempt, a third of the organization essentially put them at risk. It was very eye-opening.
Yes.
To that organization, and then essentially that the president of that organization took some immediate action to start, because it was one thing, it was a certain perception, and then there was the reality, and they were nowhere close to each other.
Right.
So
Exactly.
so things like that happen. So it's important that employees are educated, right? No matter how technically savvy they are, or how well you think they'll fare, to potential risk, everyone gets caught. It only takes once, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And it kind of leads me to the next point, around compliance and policies, right? We've heard this a lot, where we've actually had customers come to us and ask if we could do custom training, right? And the reason being, and this is something that maybe your customers, or some of the folks that are listening to us today here, or have concern around, is that there's employee handbooks, right? And we always see there's 2 or 3 or more essentially policies that are critical to the business. And a lot of these organizations are concerned that employees go to the last page, sign it, really don't understand the policy, it even doesn't know, they don't know it exists, what it actually means to the business if it's not adhered to. And that's really critical too, is really understanding components of policy management internally, and how that impacts the business. From a policy perspective, from a compliance perspective, if they're an organization that needs to be audited, if there was something that happened, how that actually impacts the business. And sometimes that employee pleads ignorance. I didn't know. Well, you supposedly read the policy. What happened, right? And so those are the things that we hear a lot that are concerning the big business too. And we can talk a little bit about later, around how to take some action around that as well.
Cool. Perfect. Well, let's look at this. Because cybersecurity is on everyone's mind, it can't help but be. We hear about it every single day. Things are getting harder. Things are getting harder for companies to remain compliant. Government's getting involved. The whole world is getting involved in how we deal with cybersecurity. So talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, you talk about, legislation and regulatory environment. It's you go back not that long ago, when you think about training employees, right? It was a nice to have, right? It was somebody that was going in, looking at security posture as a whole, looking at a layered approach and saying, hey, this makes sense, right? We're going to add training, because that will actually help minimize the risk against all the other tools and things that we have to roll out for the organization, right? It was just one piece of the overall puzzle. Now, when you look at things like SOC 2 and HIPAA and FISMA and FINMA, and there's this PCI, there's a slew of these compliance frameworks that require that you train employees.
Right.
So it's really shifted from a nice to have
Hmm.
to an absolute requirement now.
Absolutely.
And there's really, what we see is there's a couple different types of folks, right? There's the proactive people that know, that it's important to the business, they need to have it, they put it in place, and whether it's because of compliance or because of a component of cyber insurance
Hmm.
policy, they're proactive about it.
Right.
And then we see other folks that are like, we just failed an audit. What do we do, right? Like, and it's like a quick wake up call. And there's sometimes there's some folks in between, but it's usually one or the other. But
Right.
legislation, regulatory environments. I think right now it's north of 800 compliance frameworks that are out there that all require some sort of employee awareness training. So
Right.
when you think about a nice to have, handful of years back to now over 800
Hmm.
requiring it, there's been a big shift in the industry for
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. One of our clients who I just brought on board a month ago, their business is risk assessment.
Yeah.
So they put us through the ringer, making us prove that we did all this stuff, that we had all of these security, they wanted to know everything about what we're doing. And I have a feeling as the industry continues to evolve in a way that everyone's getting breached or possibly getting breached,
Yeah.
a lot of companies are going to start requiring that, whether it's official compliance or not. Clients might start requiring that before they're willing to do business with you.
100%. Yep, 100%. And you hear that more and more often now, right? That
Hmm.
is, certainly become, the common theme in
Yep.
a lot of different ways.
Yep. So this slide I love
Yeah.
because these are all pieces of what people think about when they're thinking about cybersecurity. They're thinking about, the network, they're thinking about the endpoints, they're thinking about what kind of tests they can do, the pen test, all those sorts of things. And those are the things that DIOPATH does. But if you see the asterisk, it's the people, right? And
Huh.
to your footnote, 90% of data breaches plus are because of people.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we talk a lot of to a lot of a lot of companies and a lot of folks that have shifted away from just looking at point solutions, right?
Mhm.
Hey, I have this hole to fix. I need to do
Mhm.
this. I have this other hole to fix. I got to do this.
Right.
To now looking at it, much more holistically, kind of like what
Mhm.
you guys do, Barney, right?
Yep.
Where they realize it's not just the WAN that needs to be protected,
Yep.
and that's the number one priority, or internal network, right? Or just the end users, right? Now more and more endpoints are remote now, right? So
Mhm.
that opened up a whole new, area of risk.
Of course.
People are stepping back and saying, okay, where's the starting point, and going back to, it's the journey, right?
Right. Exactly.
It's where's the starting point, and where's the end point, and what are all the different pieces that
Mhm.
touch when you think about security posture as a whole, right?
Yeah.
It's not one particular thing or two different things, right? It's really locking down and minimizing the risk both at the infrastructure, from an infrastructure perspective, which is prevention, right, around network and WAN and
Yep.
endpoints, right?
Yep.
But also the more critical things too is systems, right? Making sure
Yeah.
that is pen tests and scans, just identify are there any holes
Mhm.
over time that might open up, right? Whether it be from software or replaced hardware, right? Things change, right? Environments change, and people exploit those vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
um, Compliance, audits, and policies. Sometimes like people forget about those things until they fail one,
Right.
or it's something that they don't look at it as a big priority until they hit with
Until it is. Right.
until they hit with a fine, right?
Right.
Or like something larger happens to the
Right.
organization, right? There's a reason why some of these policies are put in place. It's companies have taken really the steps to, really take best practices or things that they know they want to, model across the organization in the best way to try to protect it,
Yeah.
right? And and then our piece, which we talk about, right?
Yeah.
The trainings and roles, right? We talk. People put so much energy into the prevention of something happening by locking down environments, which we were talking about. But when you think about the going back to the statistics, right?
Yeah.
Over 90% of breaches start with human error. For the small steps that you could take, really, and the things that you could do just around evolving people to, like I said earlier, to become much more vigilant.
Yeah.
That's the word I love to use when it comes to
Sure.
training, right? Because and by the way, when we sometimes we do these simulations and somebody gets caught once, it comes back. Sometimes they come over vigilant, right? Where they
Right.
question everything, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But it's if you can start with the employees to reduce the risk, to the organization and frankly themselves,
Mm-hmm.
it really helps secure the rest of the stuff. I always talk about it, right? You got 100 people pushing on a front door. It's it's bound to come down, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you can reduce that 100 to 25, then you know what? It's going to take a lot of extra effort for those 25 to push the door down. So
Absolutely.
this works in the same way.
Yep. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
So this is just the sort of stuff you can do, right?
yeah,
You can educate your employees, not only educate them, but test them, like make them prove to you that they got it. And
sure.
then, like we were just talking about, monitor, like know where your vulnerabilities are, keep track of them, and then have the policies in place to make sure that everything is really protected and people are really following the strategy that you laid out.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And again, these are all things that we do in Symbol and
Yeah.
to simplify the process. But even if an organization that frankly said, hey, we want a DYI solution right now.
Mhm.
Here's different things that you can do, right?
Yep.
Educate your employees. Train them on the potential risks, what's out there, right? We see the different things that come all the time. I think the biggest thing around educating employees really is frequency, right? I think sometimes you have organizations that will do one training a year to check the checkbox,
Mhm.
right? And what we see is training should be done on a monthly basis,
Yeah.
right? And they don't have to be these big, long 20, 30, 45-minute trainings.
Mhm.
The type of content we have in Symbol and the things that maybe you could do internally is these 5-minute bits, 3 minutes,
Yeah.
5 minutes, just like little tactics, little things to look at. But it's all about frequency. It's almost like going back to the ad business, right? And repetition.
Mhm.
You see an ad for an organization, once a year. Yeah, you're probably not going to have a lot of recall, right?
Right.
You start to see some of this stuff frequently. It tends to be top of mind, right?
Yep.
So when you're going to in that scenario, when you're going to make a purchase, right, you think about that brand.
Of course.
In this scenario, when you're in the position of a potential risk, you think about the things that you learned about, right, the things of,
Absolutely.
hey, geez, what did that training teach me, that oh, I remember this is what I should, this looks suspicious, these are the things that I should do,
Right.
right? That's what the education's all about, like content and frequency, right?
Yep.
Testing your employees. I think this is really important, right? Not only just train them, but it's a little quiz, right? To really enforce the retention of those trainings, right? I think back in grade school, high school,
Mhm.
there was always these pop quizzes after an assignment or whatever. Similar thing, right? It's the pop quiz of the security awareness world, right? To really just say, hey, how much was retained? And it's not to, embarrass or shame an employee or say, hey, you didn't do this right,
Mhm.
right? It's really to understand, okay, who's retaining this, who's not, and maybe do some things that are supplemental
Yes.
that really could help bring, the roster base, the employee base,
Yep.
all the way up to kind of a common area of knowledge, right? So that's really, really important. We always talk about, monitor and alert on vulnerabilities. This is, one thing that we do a bit differently in Symbol than our competitors, but you could do internally as well, depending upon some of the tools that you use. There's indicators, right, of potential risk, right? It's not only about the employees, but things at the organizational level as well, right? So we see a lot, and we have examples of. One of the things we do within Symbol is we monitor what are called doppelganger domains or domain variants. And those are things that, cyber criminals or threat actors tend to do first if they're going to set up a phishing campaign.
And I think we have examples of that coming up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I always talk about is, it's somebody that's, targeting Google, for example, and they might try to go register google.com, but use 2 zeros instead of O's, right?
Right.
Most employees aren't going to, they're not going to notice that, right? And these registries, GoDaddy, they make it really simple. You put in a domain, hey, that domain's taken, but here's 20 more that are available that are very similar, right? So, and that becomes a really big problem. And there's other things too around that, understanding if employees have, credentials that have been exposed on breach reports and things like that, right? And then policy management, going back to, originally what we were talking about, it is critical that, there's organizations take action to really make sure that their employees, if they're going to see an employee handbook, or a particular policy that they're going to sign off on, what are the things that that organization can do or put in place to ensure that that employees, reviewing that is acknowledging it. Maybe things like, they're digitally signing against it, right? Like, so they're saying, hey, I read it, I signed it. And maybe, whether it's like using someone like us or, internally, have some type of supporting training behind it that ensures that, okay, they read the policy, they signed it, but we're going to train them against it too, just to really make sure that they get it. Those are all really areas of focus that are super critical to most businesses: education, testing, monitoring, and implementation.
Awesome. So, like I promised at the beginning, we're going to give people some things they can take away to take action on today if they want to. So let's start with that.
Sure.
Take it away.
Yeah, so this is one one thing, and we're going to show a few that are super easy, right? It's we've all seen emails that come in. Sometimes we know that they're bogus, sometimes they don't. Expanding sender name. Somebody, it could be, hey, you get something from Eric Anderson, and you think, or Laurie Dempster, and you think it's legitimate because it has a name. Well, when you drill down below it, you might see that it's some random Gmail address or some address that has no affiliation with either one of us or the organization, and that's usually a really good indicator that it's something of a it's something of a threat to the organization. So you can click on the sender name, and it'll actually show you where it's coming from, whether it's through individual or through domain.
Yep, perfect. And again, number 2, the subdomain. So this one is so interesting to me because I think, to your point, Eric, the bad actors are getting so much more sophisticated, and they're getting so much more nuanced in what they're putting out there, that it's just getting harder and harder to recognize things.
Sure. And that's the thing, it's I think most people, I know I have seen that suspected phish from Amazon, right? From they tend to model the big consumer sites of the big business applications, right? And it might look like it's legitimate offer from Amazon. You do the right thing, you go to look at the domain. And some of these organizations are getting smart, where they're creating a subdomain off of the phishing domain, right? It could be amazon.xyzcompany.com. Sometimes people see, oh, it says Amazon on it, must be legitimate. But it's really not. You,
Right.
you got to focus on the root domain or the core domain, not the subdomain. The subdomain is really easy to, create, and some of these cyber criminals really use that to try to throw somebody off their game and
Yeah.
take action.
Scary.
Crazy.
So same thing.
Yeah.
This one is interesting. When we were going through this deck, this one hit me kind of hard because not too long ago we had something that our security team is great enough that they sent out a whole email to all of us saying, hey, there's a phishing attempt. It looks like Microsoft wants you to reset your password. There's going to be a big blue button that says click here to reset your Microsoft password. Whatever you do, don't do it. You do not need to reset your password right now. But when I saw this, I was like, huh, that just happened to me. Like,
it happens all the time, and it's really in a lot of cyber criminals, when you think about phishing campaigns, they go beyond this. So this would be considered an actionable link, right? They got an email, could be mentioned from Microsoft, right? Say looks legitimate. Number one, you want to hover that link, right? To really say, is this a true Microsoft link? Is this going to somewhere within Microsoft, right? And you can usually figure that out pretty quickly.
Right.
What they're trying to do is, if they try to get somebody to click through on an actionable link, it tends to bring them to a landing page, and that landing page will be identical to, in this example, a Microsoft login. And this is where a lot of cyber criminals take advantage of trying to harvest credentials, right? They're taken to basically a sign-in page, asking for username, password, looks legitimate, saying, oh, I got to update. So makes sense that I have to put my credentials in. Somebody puts their credentials in, and all of a sudden now they've exposed themselves and that organization to risk, right? So it's really a harvesting campaign.
Yep. Okay, so this is, again, like, Eric, I'll let you talk. Actually, just go ahead with this.
Yeah, and again, I think what we're doing is just summarizing, some of the things that you could do to look for, right? Just to become much more vigilant. Validate name and sender name. That's important, right? Just because it looks like it's legitimate, take an extra couple seconds, click through it, and see where it's really going, right? That's super important. And you'll quickly realize, hey, is this going to the wrong place? Is this legitimate or is it not legitimate? Like I said, going back, the days of fuzzy graphics and poor English are over, right? So sometimes you really need to take some time, kind of like I mentioned earlier, where I'm in this every single day, and there's a couple of times that it took me a couple of minutes to really dig through some things to really say, okay, there's the gotcha, right? So that's super important. Manipulation of subdomain. People we're realizing that even looking at domain, hey, that's not the right domain. But at quick glance, if there's a subdomain off of that domain, which, going back to whether it's Microsoft or Amazon or whomever, xyzcompany.com, you got to be careful of that, right? Just because it says Amazon doesn't necessarily mean it's Amazon, right? Specifically when it's listed as a subdomain, right? And that goes to the second half of it. Identify the actual domain. So not only looking at the subdomain, but what's the actual domain? Because that's what's most important, right? That's what you want to see. Subdomains don't matter, right? It's the actual domain. Links, right? Doesn't matter what they say. You can always create a link to say whatever you want. Doesn't necessarily mean that's where it's going. Take a minute to really hover it, see where it's being directed to. That'll give you an indication of is it legitimate or is it a real risk, right? And if it's a real risk, that's something you want to report to your organization, whoever, or vendor or whomever it is, to really take action on, right? And you can take action by blocking a lot of that traffic, or particularly if it's other things as well. And then assess the situation for anything weird, right? If when you think about this, outside of looking at the sender names, looking at the subdomains, looking at the actual domain, right? We always get the sometimes you get the the package delivery or notification, right? Specifically with, well, you got a package delivery from some company you never heard of,
right?
Is that something that you would expect? You might drive some curiosity, right?
Mhm.
But you can really say, gee, was I really expecting this package, or did I order anything, right?
Right.
Or, you think about those things, you're like, I didn't really order anything. Like, so, if chances are, and somebody could be sending you something or
Mhm.
whatever. So I wouldn't say in every
Right.
situation, it's not legitimate. But if you didn't, take some kind of action or do something that would, prompt
Right.
that message to you, you kind of put it into the suspect bucket,
Right.
right? And maybe do a little bit digging.
I always, in my personal email, I keep getting emails that I've won some big free thing from Home
Uh,
Depot. And I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, I know better, right?
yeah, right.
But all of this stuff, Eric, just makes me think that, like, the big thing is organizations just need to have a plan. They need to teach their people, they need to have a plan, because these things are going to happen. That's 100%
Yeah.
sure thing. These things are going to happen. So you need to have a plan what to do when it does happen, which leads us seamlessly into policy management.
Yeah.
So what what policy management could mean so many things, so many different things to so many different people. So give me some perspective on what you mean by that here.
Yeah, and kind of going back to one of the things I mentioned earlier, it's, getting that employee handbook, looking at a policy that's critical to the business, but not really knowing if an employee really understands it, even knows it exists, because they
Mhm,
might have just gone to the last page and signed it, right?
mhm,
And the enforcement of that, for a lot of organizations, specifically in the SMB, is really difficult. Um, and we've actually had, like I said earlier, we had requests to come in and build trainings around that, and we ended up building a policy management engine into our platform
mhm.
that just simplifies this. But it is critical to the business. We talk more and more, we talk more and more to companies about this. When you think about some of these statistics that are listed here, around, our employees get more done if we just let them manage their own software.
Right.
That's like a big no, right? Like, and people are
Hardcore, yeah.
download happy, right? Like people are download happy. It's how many times that you look at employees, uh, you know, device that might not have restriction on, downloadable software and
Mhm.
things like that. They have the core applications the whole business use,
Yep.
and then there's 100 other applications that are hanging out there, like they might have downloaded for whatever, and you're
Yeah.
like, come from, right?
Right.
So, in every time one of those downloads happens, or somebody takes action outside of, the group policy within an organization, that's another potential point of risk for
Mhm.
that individual in that, in that company, right? Um, the second one, it's too hard to and time consuming to track and enforce, right? So we've simplified that, but whether it's utilizing us or some other tool, or even internally, like, it's critical. Yeah, it's hard,
Mhm.
it's time consuming. um but if you can standardize everyone, um you know within understanding, okay, this is what we can do, what we can't do, enforcing that, making sure they understand that, that's another area where, outside of the training and education and all that other stuff, that's really where the risk, minimizing risk happens
Sure.
too. It's like getting everyone on the same page around what they can do, what they can't do, around, it could be things like work from home policy,
Yep.
right? Clean desk policy. The big one, public Wi-Fi. I don't know how many, I think probably all of us at some point have gone into a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts or some coffee shop, jumped on the Wi-Fi, and are you using a VPN?
Right.
Are you taking the appropriate actions to secure, that wireless
Mhm.
connection? Are you leaving it wide open if, there's happens to just be somebody that's not a great person,
Right.
around? Are you giving them the ability to, access information that they shouldn't have, right?
Sure.
So those are the things that, that when we talk about policy, the things that are important that need to be enforced, just to, minimize the threat to the
Mhm.
organization.
Got it. So this is these are the things we see when companies are not doing that. Yes. So talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, the big one, cyber breaches, right? we've been talking about this the whole webinar. We've we all talk about this every day. We see it in the news, right? Happens. The biggest companies, the biggest companies out there get breached. The small to mid-sized business, they are absolute targets because most cyber criminals know that they don't have the resources, the tool sets, the things to protect themselves, like like sometimes the big organizations. And frankly, they'd rather go breach a bunch of small businesses and extort, smaller amounts of money from many than try to break into a big one where they might have, some potential challenges, right? It might take them some time, right? They play the numbers, right? So that's not reputational damage, right? We always talk about, the breaches and, it's bad for business. Well, what's behind the breach, right? Is it, reputational damage to the organization, to the individual, right? Is it a company that, I don't know, does business online and, public breaches made of them? And guess what? There's a loss of sale there, right? Because you have a lot of people that are, that are reluctant to put their personal information or to buy something, right? Or their credit card information, right?
Well, and I think this one, Eric, is like, I think everyone gets the reputational damage for the organization. It's just like that home health place I was talking about earlier in the session that I'm like, they released the personal information for 100,000 elderly patients. Their organizational reputation is damaged for sure, no doubt about it. But I don't know who their security person is. I don't know who, like there is some point of failure in here besides the two people who got stuck in the phishing scam. And I think we can't underestimate that. Is then, so what happens when that person's like, oh my gosh, this happened on my watch, now what? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's, so it's, how does that affect your, as you mentioned, how does that affect your career, right? Happens, right? So, again, at the end of the day, we talk about, everybody's in security, not just the IT folks.
Exactly.
I don't care if you're the CEO or the janitor or somewhere in between, it's just, everyone's in security, right? So it's important that, we all do the right things that, so we can all sleep well at night,
Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this. Why, Eric, talk to us about why this is crucial for businesses.
Yeah, so going past, what are the things that are important to, continue to do business but keep your company safe, right? Are you an organization that, you have to adhere to HIPAA or, there's PCI, right? SOC 2, there's a slew of these out there, right? There's compliance that needs to be adhered to, to maintain those, different, standards. So it's critical that you surround, you build and enforce policies within the organization that, basically support those requirements. And that, includes, like I said, internal processes, navigating incidents, like the things that are listed here, that, I don't have to read every bullet point, but these are the things that, ensure that the organization's safe. And, policies are, almost as important, or I'd even say much more important, adherence in the training or any other security component that you can apply within, within a business.
Gotcha. Good stuff. All right. Well, that is it. So looking at questions, I had someone send me a question while we were in this. And the question was, we've been talking so much about how humans are the weakest link, in any organization. So this person asked me, just kind of on average, how many organizations do we feel are using some sort of security awareness training? I feel like it should be 100. Like it should be absolutely every single organization has to do it. I'm guessing it's not there, but I'd love to hear if you have any data on that, Eric.
Yeah, so and it's one of those it depends answers, right? And when I say that, it depends on size of organization, right?
Mhm.
You have the SMB, so small business into the mid market. You have the enterprise organizations, right? You have industry type, organizations that if it's retail and they're
Mhm.
all need to be PCI compliant. Well, that number might be a little bit different, right?
Right.
Because they all absolutely need it.
Right.
But I think the general statistic out there is about a third
Okay.
of organizations out there aren't doing anything around
Are
training their
not.
employees.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
and by the way, that also leads to the two-thirds that aren't necessarily always doing the
Right.
right way, training them
Right.
the right way. It might be one training a year just to
Right.
check the check box, and well, at
Or
the end
like
of the
in
day, it's
onboarding,
almost
you
like
do
not
your
doing anything,
one
right?
training at onboarding and never again.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, got it. Cool. All right. Well, that wraps it up for today. So thank you to all who joined. I sincerely hope that you learned some actionable things that you can take away from the session today. As Eric mentioned, whether you work with DYOPATH, whether you work with Symbol, whether you work with us together, whether you work with neither of us, I really, 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 please, please, please do something about this. I mean, as we've talked about, these bad actors are just continuing to get worse, and they're only going to continue to grow and continue to get better at what they're doing when they continue to trick all of us. So please, all of our information is here. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us. And I mean, please do something about this because it could save your business. And you won't even know because you did it. So you don't know
Right.
how exposed you might have been. But
Right.
Eric, what do you have to say to wrap up?
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it by myself. And thanks, Laurie, for having us,
Of
participate in
course.
this. I think it's important subject for a lot of businesses. And as Laurie said, whether it's using Symbol or Diopath or us together, or not, none are neither one of us, and it's complete DIY. It is really something that I would encourage all businesses to really focus on to start to minimize the risk to the organization.
Yep.
And in general, right? Just we're all in this together, and we're trying to curb that statistic that continues to grow on an annualized basis. So the
Absolutely.
more we can do, the more we can do collectively, just hopefully start to secure more businesses.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Eric. Always a pleasure. And
Likewise,
I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
great. Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you. Bye
Take
bye.
care.